Live on Lockdown Chats, brought to you by the Elf Renault Duster cross-country racing squad. Hi everybody and welcome once again to Live on Lockdown, proudly brought to you by the Elf Renault Duster cross-country squad. Episode 1 was all about the man behind the team and behind the wheel, Johan van Staden. We learned a lot about his history and where he came from and where he is going. Now, episode 2 is going to be all about the car. So we're going to go down into the workshop once again, where we'll be joined by Johan. He's going to take us through a history of the vehicle and where it began. And it began with a bit of a strange story, didn't it, Johan?
Yes, Matt, thank you. So, as we finished the Dakar in 2015, we decided, as I said in the first episode, to move to Renault. And so we brought the Nissan Navara back and deconstructed her. This vehicle was built by WCT post 2013 and did our season in 2014, Dakar 2015, and we brought her back and we sent her back to WCT, and she was totally deconstructed. So it ended up having the nose being removed, the rear end being removed, and some strategic piping on the frame being done, and a restraightening of the frame to allow for the upgrades that was necessary to get us to the Renault front, which has a smaller engine housing scenario, bringing new uprights into the equation, by a lower control arms into the equation, and the hubs utilized by Toyota to standardize the parts. The rear was done specifically so we can detach the rear and ship it easily. So the essential part of the upgrade was obviously to get it done and certified. As you know, the FIA rules doesn't allow us just to build and weld it together here in the workshops. We have to get it homologated. A little bit later on we'll show you the homologation certificate, and it's actually imprinted onto the frame inside the car, part of the regulations. So that process took us quite a few weeks to get the frame redone, the upgrades done on the welding of the new nose in front, and then the car was brought back here to our workshops, and Corné, myself and Mike then rebuilt the car from scratch here, and that's the Renault that you see that's standing in front of us. And you can see us, we're still busy with a little bit of upgrade on the new nose with better oil cooling and so forth, and this is the last part of our R&D that's taking place now before the car gets cladded. So yeah, it was an interesting story, having a Nissan Navara reborn into the new Nissan, the Duster, but still the same power plant. The Infinity stayed in, and then obviously the gearbox and the fuel cell, that all stayed intact. The radiator system stayed intact. It was dominantly a suspension, nose, housing and rear upgrade that brought us to the point of being able to fit the new parts.
So if we were to look at a car as a human body, the skeleton structure would be the chassis. That's what really holds us all together. It's what holds the car together. So Johan, take us through the chassis elements of the vehicle, because obviously that's what everything else is attached to.
Okay, so as I mentioned, the frame is homologated, and you saw some of the pictures and certificates. Just to explain a bit more about the frame, this is a chassis frame which is the foundation of the car, and it's built out of chromoly steel. A couple of important factors is that you can see here is a joining point that we can actually have the nose disconnected and replaced. That is allowed. This is part of the structural component of the homologation, so any crumpling here would obviously have a problem with ASO or MSA side, that you have now infringed with the crumple zone, or your structural integrity of the roll cage is affected. So therefore, no damages on this will be overseen. From here onwards, the roll cage basically with the crumple zone starts. And we move over to this side, and you can see the roll cage forming very definitely. Your cross in here, the upright members. This is the back pillar of where the roll cage ends. This component, any structural damages on this will also have a serious effect on the certification of this roll cage. You look into the back end side where the back pillar ends, you actually have the last component which houses the fuel cell. Also very important that there's no structural issues here. Here's the serial number that you can see that's also imprinted on the homologation certificate. And also houses our cooling system. And then if you move slightly here to the back end side, that's another component which is detachable and replaceable. So effectively from this point until where my hand started the showing point of the nose, which is a different color at this point in time, that section is the integrity of the main roll cage. The back and front sections can be replaced. But of stats about the chromoly. This is a very lightweight steel, extremely strong. So obviously the lightweight component is the first choice on why we bring the chromoly in. Secondly, is the integrity of it. This can take about 25 tons of impact before it deforms. So any impact before that, it will actually restore to its initial frame. You'll have some cosmetic damage and so forth, but the structural integrity will stay intact. Welding perspective, we'll talk later on to Ian. It's a very meticulous welding. WCT is experts on your MIG and TIG welding. So the welding obviously is as important as the cutting and the joining of the chromoly together. And I'm sure at future episodes we'll visit the engineering shops and show you a little bit of how these items are put onto jigs and welded together to get a better idea. But there's some photographs that we'll share with you that will give you an idea of how the frame is started from a subsection to a roll cage to a nose and a back end side. So yeah, the chassis and the roll cage is an intriguing foundation on getting a quality but safe car.
And again, looking at the vehicle as the human body, the beating heart of all of us human beings and every animal out there is the heart itself. And for a race vehicle, it's the engine.
Yes, Matt, you are 100% right. The engine is the heart of the car. What we've got here today is the 5-liter V8 Infinity engine. It is a stock standard Group N engine, which produces around about between 250 to 260 kilowatts and 500 to 526 Newton meters of torque. Like I said, it's a dead standard engine. The only thing you're allowed to do here is you can play around with your intake manifold system. You're allowed to lift the manifold up a little bit, and you can play around with your exhaust system. You can convert it to branches, and you're allowed to use a Motec dash system with the complete harness built into the engine. And what we also added here, we added the engine oil cooler just to bring the oil temperature down a bit, just to make it safer for the engine. And as well, we've got this power steering reservoir here. It's a larger reservoir than normally, because this power steering oil also feeds the onboard jack systems on the car. And yeah, that's about it.
For race vehicles, and especially in the world of cross-country racing, I've been lucky enough to get into one or two of these cars through the years. And what blows me away is how these things are able to stick to the ground and to stop. So let's look at the suspension and the braking system on the Elf Renault Duster.
This is your Riker dampers. We've used it for the last couple of years. Basically on these dampers you've got your low and high speed bump at the top. You've got your rebound at the bottom. We've played around with these dampers lots and lots of times, and we found something that worked for us. So we're not going to touch these adjusters again. So we are very happy with where we are now. And basically, what else you can do on these dampers? You can get different spring rates to suit the driver to make the car a little bit harder or softer. You can also adjust your ride height on it to make the car lower or higher. And that's just short and sweet on the dampers. To go over to the brake system on the car, we've got the power brake system. The bigger disc as we always used to use the Land Cruiser caliper and discs. This is very bigger brakes. We've got the right compound brake pads that we found eventually, so everything is working nicely for us on this brake system as well. Okay, and also what we did on the dampers, we've sent them back to Riker to get it up to FI spec. So what they did is they've made the travel longer on the damper. So in the front we've got 280 mils, and in the back we've got 330 mils, which means we can go faster over the rough stuff, which it makes it easier for the car and also faster for the driver.
So taking the structures then, we've got the skeleton, that's the chassis. We've got the beating heart, that is the engine and all of the components attached to it. But what about our skin? In this case, it's the body panels. So the cars are made to look like a racing version of their production counterpart. In this case, it's the Renault Duster. Running under the Elf Renault Duster colors as the racing vehicle, what panels are used courtesy of Renault and how much work is put into development aftermarket to make it look and feel like the production version? Johan, take it from here.
Okay, so obviously we've built the homologated frame and that needs to be cladded. Our choice on Renault is that we utilize the body parts from the existing Renault models. This standard door is one of the few items that we actually get to use: the door, the windscreen and the roof panel. You can see the car is basically stripped off and only the items that's fitted on the car at the moment is original Renault parts that can be fitted permanently. The rest of the body panels are manufactured to specifically fit this car. So we have the initial parts, we have the bumpers, the fenders, the rear fenders, and we actually take negative molds of that and we make fiberglass and carbon composite models of those same, and we cut and fit them to suit the purpose on the car because it's slightly more bulkier, bigger wheel arches, so we can get the clearance on the wheels coming in. We use the original Renault lights, front and back, and we also use the original grills and the badges and the trimmings to make the car look the part. It's important that we keep brand identity, therefore the manufacturing and time spent on getting the body parts manufactured to look the part is an essential part of the development component and takes a lot of time. As you can see, we're busy with the nose component, which is the last fitments, and that will then conclude the bumper component. A year afterwards, we're going to start putting those body panels back onto the car. It's very important to keep brand identity, therefore attention to detail on making these panels and making them look the part is of paramount essence.
And then let's climb now inside the cockpit, because this is where it all goes down on a cross-country event. And there is more going on inside of this car than anyone has ever seen up close and personal. This, for many, will be the first time you guys will actually see what it looks like inside this car. And it's more fighter jet than it is racing car.
So let's start on the left-hand side of the pilot side of the car. Top left-hand side here, we have the RNS cap meter. Now that's utilized in the Dakar dominantly for average heading or fixed compass bearings. It's basically GPS based and it gives me a heading typical of your normal compass heading, 0 all the way down. As the nose of the car is pointing, that's the heading that you're facing, so that's the RNS cap meter. Down from the RNS cap meter you can see a yellow button. That yellow button is our brake biased. That I can utilize to set my brake pressure slightly forward, slightly backwards or neutral, depends on how much weight the car is or what type of performance we're looking for. From a driving perspective, sometimes we prefer a little bit of an extra setting to the front and in some scenarios to the back, or a neutral on full weight. To the right of those two yellow buttons you'll see two buttons, which is a green and a white one. Those are jack controls. Should the navigator be outside, I can actually manually control the jacks on his side, on my side, so that we can get the jacks in and out in sand recovery. Then down to the steering wheel, this is detachable, fast removal, first of all for access and in case of emergencies for the medical crews to access the driver properly, and then obviously ease of comfort on accessing the vehicle and utilizing and working on the vehicle. It's ideal for the unit to be able to detach. On the steering wheel itself, quite a few functional buttons. First of all, here is our dial indicator with a light indicator for switching. Also all the warnings, you'll have color coding warnings that displays on the Motec stack dash. Some control buttons from the right to the left. We have a reset button, a page button, a drink button and a hooter button. So we place the steering wheel out of the way for a second. To the above of the steering wheel, the Motec stack dash. This is then the essential display for myself from a gear selection point of view, revs, oil pressure, fuel pressure, and then obviously with the page button I can access most of what the navigator can see on the main computer screen, but it helps me to get the basic stats on visual. To the right of that we have the control touchpad. That touchpad basically helps me to engage the wipers, indicators, standby fuel pumps, lights, dims, brights, the shock cooling, the start and stop, the indicators left, right, and also overriding the fuel, the cooling system as well as the oil cooling system. Then to the right of that you see the one with the red button. That is our master switch. So basically switching the master switch on, the cutoff switch isolates all supply. That's also one of the FIA rules, that you have a total isolation. Both of those same switches on the outside of the car as well. Below that, you're looking at the fire suppression system. There's a little red button with a cone around it. The firebomb is built in by the navigator's feet. This system is automated, so if we're not responding in an accident, it will go off by itself. Alternatively, you press that. Below that fire suppressing system button, we have the communication systems. This is a stereo communication system. It allows me to filter out some noise, set the volumes between me and a navigator specifically, and then we have a stage and a race stage and a road stage. The race stage specifically is allowing a more engine noise to come in and more feedback noise to come in, where on the liaisons normally we go to the road stage, filters out that, you can listen to music, make a phone call, link your Bluetooth, all that extra features. Then to the right of that is a surprise system, suppressing systems controls. For my firebomb specific, it's battery operated, and it's a test button that you basically flip around, runs a circuit test, and it gives you a green light that all systems go. Some charging units, and this is the fire outlet from a suppressing system. If you charge your phone, sat phone or anything like that, you can take with you. Those items are essential for us to be able to charge basic units. You see the two levers. Closest to me, this is the gear selection. So this is a sequential gear system. It's fitted with a gear cut switch. It operates on about 11 kilograms of force, set to each and every driver's specific needs. The distance on the gear levers are all custom made to each driver's requirements, arm length, your preferred position on holding onto the gear levers. Some guys prefer it upright straight, we prefer it left. We believe less movement from the steering wheel, the less your hand have to travel, the quicker you back onto the gear lever, the more control you have. To the lower side of the stick here, you can see almost a cut switch. This is to engage the gear cut and move it into reverse. So in case of scenario, this, if you don't press it in, you cannot select your reverse gear. Starting with the gears, it's first gear back, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, all the way back down. We actually have a no clutch scenario, so it's power shifting scenario. So we only pull away at first gear. There afterwards is power shifting. The right amount of force, it will blimp the motor automatically and allow us to switch. This is a gear cut. Your gear cut specifically using for tight cornering, into a 90 left or 90 right, almost hairpin scenarios, we would utilize the gear cut dominantly, and it also serves as a handbrake. So when you engage it, there's a little a switch here that you can engage. By putting it back and putting this pin down, it brings the park brake scenario in for us. Air conditioning system, it's rear installed. We got a outlet to my face this side, one for the navigator there, and one on the dash for demisting. Over to the safety harnesses. In essence, these are expiring every 3 years, so it's part of the FIA regulations. So every 3 years you purchase a new set, and also on wear and tear, if it's required, that the organization can ask you to put a new set in. It's a 6-point harness, so 2 straps from below the seat onto the frame itself, 2 straps from the sides. They all clip into a central system. 2 straps from above over the shoulders. Remember, when we're in the car and you're racing, you'll see on the other footage where we in race, we'll have neck braces on, the helmets on, and these belts actually go over the neck braces, stabilizing our neck and movement. They just clip in. Very quick release in case of emergencies, one turn of a button and it all flips loose and you get out very fast. Down below, standard, clutch, brake, accelerator. You can see that we have foot pedals for stabilizing our feet, and we also have guidance panels to the right hand side. Because of the immense shaking and the roughness of the races, your feet bounce around a lot. So stabilizing your feet improves your driving ability and stability of the driver in the car. It keeps your focus because now you're not worried about these items. And on the accelerator as well, you don't have to figure out where it is. You just slide your foot all the way to the right hand side after coming off the brake and press down, and that guide helps you to keep your foot on the throttle. And in essence, from a driver's point of view, we kind of have a defined split in the cockpit. The navigator does not touch any of my equipment and does not interfere with any activities on my side, nor do I that side. It's a full trust scenario that he must understand that I've got this under control, and I must realize and understand and believe that he's got his under control. As he's got a lot more functions during the racing, reading, feeding me, reading of the stats of the computer, engaging the rally safe bypass, whatever that is. He's got his hands full. I've got my hands full. And only in cases where he can't respond fast enough, I would utilize the touchpad to do something on his behalf. But as a general rule, his function is his function, mine is mine. That's my side of the cockpit.
It's exactly like a fighter jet where you have a pilot and a co-pilot. And the first thing that you'll notice when you have a look inside the cockpit is that the driver's side is on the left-hand side of the vehicle, as per most of the FIA vehicles. The navigator is on the right-hand side, and that's where my responsibility starts. So the first thing that I have to do is obviously check distance. That's where I have my odometers. I have dual odos. If one fails, you always have a backup one to run from. After the odos, you have general stats on the car where you can check temperatures, oil temps, see if the engine is a bit too hot, where I can also put on the fans, put them off. Jacks also run from this side. And then normally we have, in our national events, we have a rally safe system that is not in at the moment, but it's a plug-and-play scenario. That's just where we can communicate with the car in front or behind of us in the event. In more international events, we have a Aerotrack Sentinel, which is also a plug-and-play scenario where we can communicate to the Dakar organization, for example, in the event. And that's also part of a safety requirement for us.
So that is in a nutshell what goes into the Renault Duster, and it's a huge situation as well. Try and imagine that these guys have to do strip downs after almost every race, and the amount of development that's gone into this car by this count is coming up on 4 years. Let's talk now about some of the safety in the vehicle. There are stringent safety measures that have to be put in place, and certain things that some teams will go above and beyond. We'll talk about the safety in the car and also personal driver and navigator safety now.
Yes, Matt, safety is vital in this sport. Let's start with some of the safety features that this car offers. Here we have the fuel cell, which is in a steel casing, a bladder, which is 480 liters, separated by a firewall between the cockpit and the fuel cell itself. Here we have a rollover valve, which prevents the fuel from dispersing when the car is tilted over. Okay, in the fuel cell, we have sponges, which prevents the fuel from moving excessively in the fuel cell itself. And the fuel cell is certified every 5 years by Premier Fuel Systems. The safety features of the cockpit consists of obviously the roll cage, which is the most vital part of the cockpit, where we also have a kill switch system from inside the cockpit and a fire preventative system if a fire does break out inside the car. In the event that the driver and navigator comes unconscious in the event, here we have an external kill switch system, which anyone from the organization or any spectator can switch off the car from outside of the vehicle. Now that we've gone through the car's safety features, herewith is the protective wear that we use according to the regulation in the events. Under Armour clothes, which is fire resistant, shoes, gloves, socks, balaclava, obviously the race suit, the helmet, the neck brace, and the protective eyewear, just for the glare of the sun.
So with so much going on over the development of the car to get it where it is now, but remember, the word development is a living, breathing thing. Where do we go from here? Because there's always the next development and the next bit of tech to get your hands on. So Johan, where do we go?
You're right, Matt. The development never stops. As you can see, I've got my team with me, and they are part of the development process up to where we are and where we're going. On my right-hand side is Corneille, the crew chief of this car, Ian, senior technician, and Sean, my navigator, also the son. It's important that the team works together, so information coming from Sean and myself that we feed back to Corneille to tell them about what we would like as part of the development process, identifying problems, positive and negative comments, all contribute to the development of this car. And with that successful team behind us, there's no way we can improve this machine. So now that you've met the team, the idea with the development going forward would be that we would definitely consider upgrading our engine to a better power plant. The latest spec, there's a lot of testing going on between the new V8s and the V6s that's coming into the market, so we still have to choose, but we are definitely heading into a new power plant soon. Upgrading the rear suspension to independent would obviously be a big advantage. And then reducing weight on the car generally by getting rid of the fiberglass panels and going over to carbon composite and carbon graphite panels. That was all part of the development plans. And then obviously on the engine management, we're definitely looking at forward upgrading towards the M1. It will bring more features in and obviously give us a more competitive edge. That development is ongoing. Where we have found ourselves at this point in time, we've done enough development from the 2019 season into 2020. We're going to see the 2020 out, and if the 2020 season, as it goes with the lockdown, does not exist, we will utilize this upgrade for 2021 and work in 2021 to get the 2022 upgrades as mentioned earlier in the discussion. So part of the development is obviously the sponsorship and the products that we utilize. From Elf's perspective, they put a relationship together with Diesel Electric. Now, for the people that doesn't know, this product is not available on the shelf. You can only obtain it from a Diesel Electric chain in South Africa. There's branches all over South Africa. So they're the sole distributors of the Elf product for Elf, which makes this brand unique. You all have a very interesting classic range towards the racing range. So you're welcome to contact Diesel Electric online, different platforms or visit the shops to obtain the Elf products. It's really superior, and then the relationship exists because not only is Elf a sponsor, but Diesel Electric also a sponsor of our team. Therefore, the relationship is just strengthened by the common interest and the common goals achieved by the co-working of the two sponsorships and the brands and the distribution together. I would like to tell you about other vehicles also racing under the Elf brand. Last year, we were fortunate enough to get Werner Mostert and his brother Leon to join us in a side-by-side. They've successfully raced with us in Paris. They've joined us in the Dilsturm race. So we're looking forward to have them as permanent team members as we go forward when this lockdown is lifted. They're really value-added team members, and as a matter of fact, they were the side-by-side champions in 2019.
So great to see the end of episode number 2, where we have now ticked the box. We've learned about the man in episode number 1, Johan van Staden, and now we've learned about the car itself. Continued development obviously takes a lot of work, a lot of money as well, and a lot of support, and you need somewhere to do all that development, which brings us nicely looking forward into episode number 3, where we'll get up close and personal inside the workshop. We'll talk to some of the mechanics and discuss some of the incredible tools and kit that is needed for this constantly developing sport that we know and love as cross-country racing. Hope you guys join us for the next show.